Assalamu alaikum. My name is Farooqi and I'm a student of Tartil Academy under Sheikh Ismail Isa.
ذكر وموعظة ونور فيه شفاء للصدور وشفيعنا يوم النشور آياته تروي المدى وصفاته نبع الهدى نلقى الجنان بحبه لن تستقيم حياتنا إلا به هو القرآن والفرقان إليه تنصت
Bit of a story.
الأكوان
So, like a lot of other Muslim kids, when I was, growing up, my parents asked me, "Do you want to do a HIFZ program?" And they didn't force me or anything, but they, probed. And my sister was very enthusiastic about it, so she jumped on it. And I used to copy her a lot, so I was like, "I'll do it too." My grandparents, my parents, everyone was really happy. I did it with Sheikh Mahmoud, who's still in the area. Probably lasted about a month, I think. I couldn't get through Surah Mursalat, and then I wanted to quit. And I felt embarrassed, but my parents didn't shame me for it. They were really understanding about it. That was when I was a kid. And then, fast forward probably like 12, 13 years or something. I was in college. It was 2014. And it was a summer internship. I remember I was going into my junior year, and someone who I went to Nur al-Iman school with as a kid passed away, and he was my age, and it was Amr Gabal. May Allah have mercy on him and grant his family patience. He passed away during his internship that summer. It was pretty tragic, and my very good friend was extremely close to him at the time, and so we went to the janazah at ICJ, and that's the first time I think I went to a janazah where it was someone that close to my age. So it really hit me in a unique way, where I was sitting there saying, "This is crazy! Like that he's my age. He went to school with me, And at that time, I didn't know who Sheikh Ismail was, but they had someone recite Quran, and in the midst of that emotion, the masjid was packed. There were probably 1,000 people there. And Sheikh Ismail was reciting Quran, and you could see everybody's hearts feeling moved, obviously a very emotional setting, with the probably 18, 19-year-old kid passing away. And the Quran just put us all in harmony, even though it was a very tragic situation, and I felt like that really moved me. So I started on my own reading a little bit of Quran, and Surah Rahman always called out to me, so I'd listen to that on repeat. And one day I was like, you know what, let me just try to see how this goes. And so I tried to do it without looking, and I spent a couple of weeks, months probably, doing that. And I asked my dad to text me one day, and he goes, "Yeah, let's try it." And he's like, "Not too shabby, I didn't make that many mistakes." So I remembered saying, "Who's that guy who recited at the janazah? I want to find out who he was." And I'm Googling and I'm YouTubing and I'm trying to figure it out, and eventually I land on ICJ's page and I find out it's him. Sent an email, and it's funny, I still have the email to today. It's 2014, right? And I'm just like, "Assalamu alaikum, the Imam who recited the Quran, I wanted to get in touch with him to see if he's taking students." And Sheikh Ismail responds back and says, "Yes, please join my class," whatever. And so, August of 2014 is when I began, and that's kind of how I got into it. So when I was a kid, I let go because I think I was a kid and I wasn't ready to commit to it, right? Because for that, it was labeled HIFZ program, and it was like you were in a room with a bunch of people who were all very dedicated to this craft. And if you weren't at that level of dedication, you'd feel like you're not going to keep up with them. But then what happened when I was an adult is, I'm in college and I'm going to Sheikh Ismail. And yes, in the back of my mind, I always thought it would be amazing to finish the Quran. It would be like a huge blessing. But I was like, why not just try it, right? I was like, let's just see how this goes. Sheikh Ismail also would never label it as like you're in a hot HIFZ program. He would never say that, these are my expectations that you have to do this. He would always just say, do what you can, right? And do it as good as you can, right? Like improve your quality, don't worry about quantity, right? That was his mantra. And so I think to continue to say like when I felt like stopping, I'd remember multiple different things. I had various motivations, but I'd say the beginning motivation for me again was that janazah, right? And it reminded me, and that kept me going for a long time, that I could pass at any moment. Then I think my motivation, and over time you'll see, and students of the Quran will tell you the motivations change, right? Then I found it to be my parents, that I want my parents, how can I reward them? What can I give them back? You come to this point in life when you start appreciating your parents in your, late teens, early 20s. And I was at that point where I'm like, wow, they do so much for me, so how can I reward them? Then I got to that. Then I went to, a different phase of like, I want to get closer to my messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this was his tradition. He was the first, Hafiz of Quran, right? So I was like, to get closer to him, I wanted to do it. So it changed over years, and I'm not gonna lie, there's many times that Sheikh Ismail was my motivation, and seeing the way he, if I was to succinctly explain the studying under Sheikh Ismail it was that he never pushed me, he drew me. You know, he didn't push me saying, go harder, go faster, do better. He would draw me to the Quran by showing me why I should love it. And I think that is what kept me going all these years. It, you know, it took me eight-ish years, I'd say, to finish the whole thing, you know, alhamdulillah. But it was that, you know, that it draws you. Don't push, draw, right? Let the Quran draw you to it. You know, Allah will draw you towards the Quran. And that experience is what really kept me going. You know, I was at a point in my life where a lot of people go through in their teenage years where you're trying to figure out like what and why, like existential crisis, you can call it. And I think getting closer to the Quran was my way of trying to get close to God, right, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that has always been the underlying sentiment here, right, that what's the best way to get close to Allah? It's to read his book, right, to understand what he's saying to us, what is his message. And that has always worked. And I don't know anyone who's truly tried it and said that failed, right? And like with their heart understood that Allah speaks to us through the Quran, right? And like it's crazy how you can open a page randomly, and this happens to every student of Quran. You open the Quran and it lands on a page that is so relevant to your day, right? We talk about like these things like horoscopes, right? Open the Quran, see what it's telling you today, you know? And you'll see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to you. I used to come to class and I'd feel like I was doing a decent job because he'd assign me and say, okay, try to do this, and I'd be able to do it and I'd feel happy with my progress. Like he'd be like, okay, today, over the whole week, I want you to finish these 5 ayahs. But like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, right? And I'd try all week, I'd push and I push and I push, and I get to that point and I felt happy if I was able to do them without mistakes. And then one day the student comes in and he recites 10 pages, just one shot. And it was like maybe 15 minutes of recitation. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do that. I don't think I can ever do that, you know, like that's never gonna be me. And it discouraged me, and to be honest with you, and not like out of envy, but more so out of like, I can never do that. And Sheikh Ismail like smiled at me because he realized what was going on. And he goes like, don't worry, you'll get there. And I didn't believe him because truthfully, like again, you know, going into this, I didn't know where it was gonna go. And so the challenge I think in the beginning was like, reading something over and over and maybe not feeling like you're moving, you know, feeling like you're not getting better at it. But it's not day over day, it's the week over week and the month over month, right? So, and I think a lot of people are in this mentality, especially those who come from like, when you hear about like doing hifz as a factory, or like go to a madrasa, do a 2-year program, 3-year program, you get in this mentality where it's like a degree, right? It's like a bachelor's degree, whereas like this is completely different, right? You pray every day. There's no quitting praying. You pray for the rest of your life. Hifz and Quran are the same way, right? You don't quit being a hafid because you keep going. You're gonna have good days and bad days, right? So I think for me, the bad days used to be really heavy on me. Like if I went to class and I had a lot of mistakes, it would kill me. You know, like my whole week would be ruined. And Sheikh Ismail would tell me, it's okay. You're gonna do it again. Like this is not one and done. You're not, you know, this is not like you're in prime time, one shot and it's over. So I think that was my biggest challenge, is like being hard on myself for like, I felt like I wasn't able to do enough. I'm not good enough at it. I'm trying, I'm still making mistakes. My tongue can't do what it's supposed to do. You know, like those are all the frustrations I think in the early times you feel. And then obviously like just the time commitment is also just really hard too, right? Like if you're doing school full time, which I was doing, or working, like it's not easy to squeeze it in, especially, you know, in today's day and age. So I think just being able to balance those things is one of the big challenges people face. But when I grew up, a lot of the fear in my mind about being a hafiz was that if you forget it, it's really sinful. If you forget the Quran, like you'll be punished, right? And so that fear loomed in my mind about like, should I even do this? Because like, I'm not trying to get punishment for something I was trying to do with a good deed, right? So Sheikh Ismail was one of the first teachers who ever told me like, listen, you're human, you're gonna forget things, right? Like even the Prophet ﷺ once, you know, when leaving prayer, he told me the story about like, you know, he forgot an ayah, and so his companions, he looked at them and afterwards and said, why didn't someone correct me, right? Or tell me what it was. So, you know, Sheikh Ismail always reminds us that like, it's okay, you know, that you forget things. Like it's not about trying to, you know, perfection is the goal, of course, but like you're gonna stumble along the way. And that's not to say mistakes are light, you take them seriously, but as human beings, right, it's in our nature. So I think that also for a lot of people, when they think about like, well, I don't want to do this because then I'll be sinful if I forget. That's a terrible reason to not do it, right? And I actually think that's one of Shaitan's tricks, right? To tell you that like, oh, don't do it. The responsibility of knowledge is gonna be a burden. Rather, it's like, what are you gaining from your knowledge, right? Like, what is your life gonna benefit from doing this? And looking at it from that perspective, and then, you know, going into what we would call loving the Quran, right? I think one thing that, since learning it, has really motivated me, and it's crazy because I felt like I've had, you know, situations where I can envision this in reality is that, you know, the Prophet ﷺ told us that read the Quran because it will come on the day of judgment as an intercessor for you, right? And then he says, read and your station will be increased until the last ayah you recite. And in my head, I always think actually of video games where like, you know, like leveling up, you know what I mean? Like moving up the floors, and each ayah you recite, you keep going up and up and up, right? And so in my head, I always kind of envisioned that, right? Where I'm like, you know, if I passed away right now, what am I taking with me? You know, how much do I got, and how much Quran can I recite, right? That's always been a motivation in terms of when I want to, you know, stop. And then honestly, the dark days thing is really true. I think, you know, life, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests everybody in different ways. You go through challenges individually, as a community, as a family, that will push you, right? And I think coming to realize like that the Quran brings that sense of sukoon in your life, that sense of peace in your life, will always bring you back to it, right? When I have a dark time, I realize part of the dark time is not having the Quran, right? And it's like, you know, again, it puts your body in equilibrium, right? To have it, and it sort of becomes like an addiction, where like, you know, if you ask Sheikh Ismail, for example, what would happen if he didn't recite Quran outside of prayer for a week, he would probably just say, I wouldn't be able to do it, or I would lose my mind, right? And again, I'm not saying this about myself, I'm saying people I've met, they literally describe the Quran. One of his brothers told me, he said, it's like eating ice cream to me. He said it's like eating ice cream. So he loves it so much that it's literally that joy of eating ice cream. You know, you open that Ben and Jerry's for the first time, you scoop the top layer, right? Like that feeling, he feels that when he reads Quran. I'm like, wow, that's a great way to describe it, you know? And that's joy, that's love, right? So I think when you're in those dark times and you feel like you're neglectful to the Quran, just go back to it. You know, just go back to it immediately, you know? And that's been my effort. I wouldn't say I've done it perfectly, but I've just tried, you know, whether it's on your phone, whether that's for a minute or something, and you've been neglectful, just get back to it. I think Sheikh Ismail, you know, again, it's been many years with him. He's humble about it. He doesn't like, you know, us talking too much about his, you know, his impact on us. But subhanAllah, like as a teacher, I think I couldn't have asked for more. You know, there are a lot of dark times, tough times that I went through in life as well, that he was just there for me too, right? And the fact that he was the one who connected me to the Quran, and there was this consistency, right, of, you know, somebody who just loves the book so much, right? And like, you'll be reciting and, you know, my eyes are closed because I'm reciting and I'm going through, I look up and his eyes have tears in them. This is an ayah that means so much to him. Or he'll be in a daze and he's thinking about something related to that ayah, whether it's a story in his life or a story of his teachers or a story of what the Quran is actually saying. One of the advices that Sheikh Ismail, you know, always gives us, you know, he uses the phrase like opening, fath, right, about Quran. And he says like these openings come and go. Allah gives you these openings where you might memorize a lot in a short period of time and then a little in a long period of time. You know, and he says if you want to get those openings, you know, send salawat and make istighfar. You know, ask for forgiveness, do a lot of salawat. And that's, you know, you can feel it once you think about it if you're having an opening, because you realize it's more than what you can do. Like I can normally do 2 ayahs a day and that's my normal, but today I'm doing 15. Where's that coming from? It's not me, right? Allah's giving me some sort of a opening, you could say. So these futuhat, these openings, I think are really important to not take for granted. You need to have people that you do it with. I think that's really important, right? And like, I've had a couple different people who've been with me for the journey the whole way. You know, obviously your teacher will be with you, and I always advise people to stick to one teacher if you can. It's the best because they know you, they know the way you recite. But, you know, like Noor Rustam, you know, native to the NCGB community, right? You know, mashallah, been a hafiz for over a decade, you know, since he was a kid. But I would always reach out to him and be like, dude, I'm struggling with the surah. You know, I remember like Surah Jinn was one that was really hard for me from the back, right? It's a confusing surah. And so I was like, man, I'm struggling. He's like, you'll get it. Don't worry. It's okay. He's like, I still struggle with it. And I was like, you've been doing this for 15, 16 years. You still struggle? He's like, yeah, it happens, man. And so, you know, finding other people who also experience that with you, a community of students, I think is really important. And it helps you a lot to have other people to test with, right? And experience that with. And I think doing peer testing is also really important and helpful. Perhaps I'll share advice that I think is timeless to me. The one thing, you know, I'm a student of Quran. I don't call myself a hafiz. I don't think I ever will or want to. That's a huge responsibility to just say that. You know, I think as a student of the Quran, the one thing that I've seen in other people and tried to emulate myself is to love the book, and I think, unfortunately, today you see a lot of kids who are put into these like factories, for lack of better words, and it's like you have 2 years to finish this or else, and they put their life on halt. And I'm not saying that this doesn't work. For a lot of people, it works miraculously, and they're able to do this and they fall in love with the Quran. And alternatively, I've seen a lot of people, and as like a youth coordinator, I've seen a lot of young guys and girls who unfortunately have a very severed relationship with the Quran because it was forced upon them in a way that's not befitting to the book, right? The book was not forceful upon any, people. The book opens up to you, right? Shaykh Ismail describes it literally like an opening. Think of like a flower, in the day, and like it opens slowly, right? It's not ripped open. You're not going to find the beauty in it. It's going to be in petals and pieces, right? It has to open. And I think the one thing I remind myself, and I always thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, is that if Allah can bless you in your heart with the love of this book, you will try forever, right? You will try forever. You may take 20 years, but what's the rush if you love it and you're trying? You can answer that yourself, right? Like I can answer myself, am I really trying? Am I putting my effort forward? Am I pushing myself as much as I can? But then the thing to me is like, do I still love this is a really important question, right? Like, do I just love the Quran? Do I love reading it? Do I love the feeling I get when I read it, right? Find a way to love the Quran and the challenges will feel easy. Find a way to love the Quran, you won't feel in a rush. Find a way to love the Quran and it'll feel like your companion, right? Like a friend. And it's a friend that's with you through every hardship, every happiness, every moment. Because it's not just when you're reading it in a sitting down textbook setting, but also when you start in the Quran and when you're praying, right? And I think that love is something that if people are able to find that and have it, and again, it's something that you ask Allah to always maintain in your heart, it'll carry you. It'll carry you. And how do you fall in love with the Quran, I guess, is this question that I think everybody has to answer on their own. It's the same way of how do you fall in love with your Lord, right? To love the Quran is to love Allah. And I think it's a step that I think many people have taken in the past and many people will continue to take. It's a preservation of his book, right? And I think finding love in the Quran, I once met this brother and I love his words. I'm going to steal his words. He said, I'm not good at memorizing. I don't have a nice voice for reciting. I don't, understand the depths of this ocean in front of me. But I know one thing with certainty is I love it. I love this book and I love this Quran. And I know that for certain. And that's one thing I can't be taken away from, it's mine. I love this book. And, he said it with tears in his eyes. And I was think back to that. I said, that's something you want to, experience. Don't stress yourself out over like timelines. Like, yes, it's good. You should have a plan. It's important to have dates and goals and everything in life. But the Quran is not like, geometry. It's not like studying, a normal subject. There's a spiritual component to it. And this is actually something that comes up. And I remember when I asked one of our teachers in college, I was probably senior, 20 years old. And I asked him, I said, like, sometimes I feel like I'm just forgetting things. And I'm like, I knew it this morning and at night I can't recite it. And he would say that, the Quran, it chooses who can accept it. In other sense, the Quran has an ability to basically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously, like if you're doing things that are not good for your spiritual state, how can the Quran be inside you with harmony, right? Like oil and water don't mix, So it's like, protect your gaze, number one and first and foremost, right? Like, protect your gaze because, you can't switch gears from looking at something that you shouldn't look at to then looking at Allah's book. Protect your ears. You can't, and this is a hard one. A lot of people struggle with this, and I don't want to be, the bad guy here to say it, but music, right? Music really does hurt your hifz, and it took me years. I'm not gonna front here. I'm gonna be really honest here. It took me years to truly accept that, it's like oil and water, right? And I'm not saying, I'm not giving a fatwa. I'm not, not qualified to be saying music haram or halal. I'm just saying, when you're on this journey to try to memorize the Quran, you have to make commitments. And there are sacrifices. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's a walk in the park here, right? There are challenges. You have to make sacrifices. You're gonna have to wake up early in the morning. You have to do it every day, right? There's no days off here, right? There's no weeks off. it's a continual process and journey, and things like music just make it a lot harder for you, right? Like, when you're listening to things that talk about zina and about, things that are not allowed in the deen, and then, and then you're going to switch those in Surah Rahman, how's it going to mix? It's a tough thing. And I think for a lot of people who are in their teens and even adults, I'd say it's very challenging to hear that. And for me, it's very challenging to experience that too. But again, like, how are you going to get over that hump of like, being able to reconcile? I think just love, like love the Quran so much that you prefer to hear the Quran than you do to listen to a song. And it sounds crazy to say that for people who are very engrossed in today's culture. It's very normal, but it's tough to hear that. But I think if you can get to that point, man, where you can actually come to switch hands, right? And put the Quran in a place where you listen to that and find the same ecstasy that people find in music, it's special. Like, music is such a part of our lives now, right? It's such a part of society. It's such a part of daily life for a lot of people. You wake up in the morning, you drive to work, you listen to music. You're working out, you listen to music. You're doing a chore, you listen to music. And it sounds, for people who are not in the habit of it, for people who are not in the habit of it, for people who are not in the habit of it, it might sound crazy to say, instead of working out to, Eminem or something, you're gonna work out to Quran, right? It's almost like you'd rather just not, for some people, right? And I think, again, we make these dependencies that we have to then undo, right? And in some cases, like, it's difficult if you don't understand exactly what it is, but I think everyone, finding a favorite reciter is always a good thing. Find someone that just connects to you. You like the way it sounds, right? And obviously, they're reciting correctly. Understanding the meaning of it is really important too, right? Like, if you learn the meaning beforehand or just read the meaning and then you listen to it after, it connects with you. And I think, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think if you try to think of going from like, I listen to music every day to I'm going to listen to Quran every day, it's a very challenging journey there. You're missing a lot of steps in between. I think it's a gradual process, right? Like, you have to wean off of one and wean onto the other. And on a practical level, man, like, come to things like gyms and stuff, find company of people who don't listen to music. That's really it. And I have a few friends of mine, I'll save their names for, they're humble folks, but, spending time with them at the gym, in hangouts and stuff, I didn't feel like I was missing out on a big part of society because of them, whereas in other settings, you might feel like, oh, I didn't listen to the new album, I'm a loser. But when you hang out with people who also are on the same basis, not because you're hating on it or you're condemning people, but just because you don't prefer to, right? You'll find, company in that, and then you realize you're not the odd man out or odd woman out.